The 2024 presidential election is shaping up to be a Trump-Harris match. That means the Democratic VP search is on. The Biden surprising announcement, that has ramifications even here in Illinois. Security for the DNC, let's talk about that and what's next. We've seen some crazy elections in Chicago over the years, but wow, this is shaping up to be one interesting political season. So many are tuning in, whether it's on their phones or on their televisions. Everyone wants to know just what's going on. So we have the 4 major takeaways for this past week. Let's take a look at the president's announcement. Some had been expecting it. Still, it was a political earthquake. Not just for the Democrats, because now they have to refocus, but what about the Republicans? They're going to face a new challenger they hadn't expected come November.
It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think it's more important than any title.
Years from now, this Oval Office address will be in history textbooks. President Joe Biden explaining to the nation 4 days after why he announced he was withdrawing from the 2024 presidential race.
I am running and going to win again.
Despite weeks of vowing he was in it until the end. But mounting pressures from within his own party, plus campaign donors promising to withhold funds, ultimately led the president to leave a stunning Sunday surprise on social media. He was standing down.
You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition.
Biden endorsed his own Vice President Kamala Harris, and within days, she had broken fundraising records, mobilized black women, including members of her own sorority, headquartered here in Chicago. Harris is tasked now reintroduce herself not as VP and also define herself as the presumptive Democratic nominee.
Before I was elected vice president, before I was elected United States Senator, I was elected Attorney General of the state of California, and I was a courtroom prosecutor before then. And in those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
Republicans, meanwhile, who had enjoyed watching the post-debate Democratic Party infighting, preached unity around Donald Trump. But the former president called Biden, quote, the worst president in the history of the United States by far. And on the campaign trail, Trump quickly pivoted to attacking his new opponent.
For 3.5 years, Lion Kamala Harris has been the ultra-liberal driving force behind every single Biden catastrophe. She is a radical left lunatic who will destroy our country. If she ever gets the chance to get into office, we're not going to let that happen.
At his rally this week in Charlotte, North Carolina, Trump signaled that this next campaign phase could be more divisive, even as Republican leaders warned party members against using overtly racist and sexist remarks about Harris. Trump is tying Harris, though, to the most unpopular Biden policies, including his handling of the economy and the southern border.
So she was the border czar, but she never went to the border, right? She was appointed by this horrible president, this horrible guy. How this guy got to be president in his basement. He stayed in his basement.
It was the first week out on the campaign trail this week for Trump's new running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance.
My fellow Americans, it's been the privilege of my life.
A big GOP talking point has been questioning whether Biden is fit to finish out his term if he's not in a position to run for a second one, and what role Harris played in the White House.
She signed up for every single one of Joe Biden's failures, and she lied about his mental capacity to serve as president. Our country has been saddled for 3.5 years with a president who cannot do the job. And that is all because Kamala Harris and the rest of the Democrats lied about his ability to be our president. I think we ought to kick them all out come November and replace them with some people who care about this country.
Here is where we stand. After the June 27th CNN debate that set off panic for Democrats, 2 weeks later, the attempted assassination on former President Trump, just days before the RNC, then Biden dropping out, pressured by his party to do so, changing the course of the 2024 presidential race. Milwaukee political analyst Mordecai Lee.
The last 2 weeks have been exhausting. And first, the assassination attempt and Trump's really heroic reaction to it was sort of like a tsunami that just captured American sympathy. And likely, had there not been any other changes, would have led to him winning by a landslide in November. I think it's amazing how quickly that's dissipated, partly, I think, because of his acceptance speech, but mostly because Biden dropped out. And so now we have a second tsunami within 2 weeks, and all of a sudden it's Harris. And so that once again rearranges the pieces on the chessboard. And it's sort of like starting from scratch.
So as the parties rearrange those chess pieces, let's talk endorsements. Bill and Hillary Clinton, they're supporting Harris. So are Michelle and Barack Obama. Their support came later in the week. Still, Harris says, much appreciated. Chicago now is putting in place its security plans for the DNC. Security for the DNC has been top of mind as these officers have been training for more than a year. But with the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump, it's an even higher priority.
An incident like what took place in Butler, Pennsylvania, must never happen again. We have reviewed the security plan for the DNC and remain confident. Our plan allows us to adjust for any possible scenario.
Law enforcement ready at the Republican convention and saw few protesters, many more demonstrators expected in Chicago, who have a constitutional right to be within sight and sound of the convention. However,
what we will not tolerate is vandalism to our city. What we will not tolerate is violent activity. If we see that, we will put an end to it quickly.
Here is the United Center perimeter. Fences will go up August 17th with multiple vehicle checkpoints. The red zone for those only with credentials. The yellow allows for a softer lockdown. At McCormick Place with a wider yellow zone, closures began a day earlier, August 16th. This is all a national special security event.
The amount of resources that go toward a national special security event are significantly more than a normal Secret Service protected site. So the resources that we have available will be sufficient.
The other unknown, what happens if at the last minute thousands of more migrants are sent to Chicago, as Texas Governor Greg Abbott has promised to create chaos during the DNC. Is the city ready?
Our collective resources are prepared for as many as 15,000, but we certainly hope that, Governor Abbott finds Jesus Christ as the Lord and Savior and don't do that.
There are a lot of factors now for Kamala Harris in picking her vice president, her running mate. Some believe it will be someone from a swing state. Others say it has to be a white male. Probably someone with a diverse point of view, bringing those voters to the table. Donald Trump has his running mate. Now the time clock is ticking for Harris to pick hers. J.D. Vance was not a household name until former President Trump picked him to join the Republican ticket for November. An Ohio senator for less than 2 years, known for his autobiography, Hillbilly Elegy. Now the chief surrogate and ally of the country's most powerful Republican.
Donald Trump won the Republican primary in 2016, won the election, and won another Republican primary just a few months ago. Democrats are the ones who want to throw out 14 million ballots and not elect Kamala Harris, but select Kamala Harris. With a bunch of billionaires and Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi making the decision instead of Democrat voters, it's disgraceful, and that's the threat to American democracy, that corruption and that broken process.
Vance is meant to attract working-class voters in the all-important Midwest states. But this week, Democrats quickly began attacking past statements that he made, including previously supporting a national abortion ban. plus his comments about women during this Fox News interview from 2021.
That we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies.
With the Trump's VP pick set, now the question becomes, who will Kamala Harris choose to stand beside her? Northwestern University professor Tabitha Bonilla says the goal is for that person to appeal to demographics where Harris is weaker.
I think one of the biggest concerns that I've heard people voice about Kamala Harris is that Biden had a lot of appeal to moderate voters, and particularly moderate white voters. And so I think the goal would be to choose someone who is perceived as maybe a little bit more moderate than her.
She says that explains the list of possible candidates that has been circulating, which includes swing state governors and a senator. The thought is Harris needs to retain that blue wall of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. It is not a coincidence that several of them made sure they were seen on national TV this week.
The contrast between her and those running on the other side couldn't be clearer.
I want to make sure that Kamala Harris wins.
This is about the future of this country.
I spoke to the vice president yesterday, shortly after I spoke to the president. You know what we focused on? Defeating Donald Trump. Our conversation was all about how we beat Donald Trump and protect our freedoms here in this Commonwealth.
Next week, Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, along with Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, will campaign for Harris together. While Governor Pritzker is considered a long shot, he's from a safe blue state. He's also not shying away from being interested.
What I can tell you is that I was very clear with the vice president and her staff that I'm going to work my heart out for her to become the next president of the United States. And as I have, by the way, all the way until now, as you know, I've traveled the country extolling the virtues of the administration. We're going to keep doing that. I'm going to Tennessee. I'm going to Arizona.
That vetting for the VP, it is underway, and there is urgency. A choice must be made by August 7th. So what's next for the political world? Donald Trump is saying he is not yet agreeing to a debate with Kamala Harris because she is not the official nominee. That's about to change because the DNC is going to hold a virtual roll call very soon.
105 days until Election Day. And in that time, we've got some work to do.
Vice President Kamala Harris has secured enough promised delegates. Now the party could make her the official nominee as soon as August 1st. Democrats are poised to virtually nominate Harris and whomever her running mate might be by August 7th. Professor Stephen Maynard Caliendo from North Central College notes how quickly this is all happening.
This is unprecedented in so many ways. It will be interesting to see, for me, when the Democrats decide to convene the roll call. They're pretty clear that they're not going to wait until they get to Chicago in the convention. They're going to do it virtually.
Less than 4 months from now, we are going to win Michigan. We are going to take back the White House in a monumental landslide.
Next week, we can also expect to see both sides back on the campaign trail. Former President Trump and J.D. Vance will be together in Minnesota. Vance also has solo rallies scheduled in Nevada and Arizona. It looks as though the rallies to be indoors or smaller outdoor venues. Advice from the Secret Service following the assassination attempt. Harris heading to Atlanta on Tuesday, but questions still remain about what role President Biden will play in her campaign going forward. He is, after all,
he's still the leader of the party if he's permitted to be that. And I think it's important for the Democratic Party to treat him that way and give him the respect that's necessary. If they disrespect him down the stretch here, that's not going to be good for the Democrats on November 5th.
He certainly will be a surrogate for Vice President Harris. Whether he's chief surrogate or not will probably depend on the amount of energy that she feels he can bring and that the campaign feels he can bring. A lot of what's been happening over the last couple of days has been characterized by a new energy, and anything that might be perceived as sort of pulling back on that, because it's such a short run to the election at this point.
Election Day is November 5th, but many states have early voting or voting by mail beforehand, so voters will be heading to the polls well before that. Trump has name recognition. Voters know who he is and what he stands for. It will be a much bigger challenge for Harris, who must define herself before her opponents do.
There's not a lot of time for Kamala Harris to introduce herself to folks who don't know her very well and make a case that she would be a better president than former President Trump.
Well, it has been one unpredictable political season already, and Chicago about to be the center of the political universe with the DNC here in August. Changes already, more developments to come. We'll be keeping an eye on all of it. Thank you for checking in.